Hi, my name is Jennifer Maisonneuve, and I'm the lead ambassador of Women in Tech Israel chapter. I'm very, very happy to welcome you today to our Life Insights series with this amazing Cycle Central workshop, How to Biohack Your Body and Crack Your Careers. Just a little note, tomorrow we also have another webinar part of this Life Insights series with our fellow chapter Netherlands. It's at 7:30 p.m. Israel time, or 6:30 CET, and they're going to be talking about taking charge of their career. So see you there also tomorrow. Welcome, everybody. Just before we're starting, and I introduce you to our co-founder, board member of Women in Tech, Avital Esgad, I want to just to give you a little quick overview about who is Women in Tech. So we are an international organization with a double mission: to close the gender gap and to help women embrace technology, STEM. Gender equality is at the center of our mission. We aim to empower women and girls with the necessary skills and confidence to succeed in STEM career field. For those who are new to Women in Tech Israel chapter, this chapter was created in March 2020, and we launched it in May 2020 during our 24-hour worldwide event. The team is made of Anne Baer, which is the CEO of Icar Innovation. She's our strategic advisor. She's not with us today, but I'm sure she's looking at us today. And Avital Esgad, our board member. Hi, Avital. Quick introduction of who is Avital. So she will be introducing our fabulous presenter today. Avital was born in London, and she moved in Israel in the summer of 2016. Avital combined her passion for technology and innovation to inspire and promote change. She founded iPeach in 2018, and this company focuses on strategic thinking and design, creating brands and products that ensure a voice above the noise. Prior to founding iPeach, she was the head of business development for venture capital fund 83 North, where she worked as a scaling and advising portfolio company. Avital, thank you to be with us today, and I'll let you the stage.
So I'm never really sure if I can match Jennifer's energy, but I will try. Yes, my name is Avital. I'm originally from London. And today we are introducing Yarin, Weltzman from South Africa, who now lives in Israel, and we'll be talking on Cycle Central. So what is the idea of cycle syncing? Before we even get there, and she will cover that bit, I wanted to introduce you to who she actually is. So as we said, originally from South Africa, she's an award-winning UX designer and innovator that focuses on human-centric approach to translating ideas into tangible strategies and offerings. She took her passion for innovation and actually co-founded the company that we both worked on, High Pitched, and was the creative director within the company. She's consulted local startups and global clients such as Barclays Bank, Techstars, and Google's Leadership Institute. She has a master's degree in innovation, design, and entrepreneurship. But she's also very passionate about FEM and everything to do with FEM. So in this workshop today, she'll be discussing all things FEM and how to sync your cycle with working and optimizing who you are and how you do it. So over to Yarin, who will be leading this workshop. And if you have any questions, just submit them and we will be asking them throughout the conversation.
Thank you, Avital, for an epic intro, and welcome everyone to Cycle Central. Just want to make sure that we have the presentation up. Tech side, we're all okay? Cool. So, just once. Avital, I'm just making sure that my screen is being shared. Okay, we're gonna begin. So this past Shabbat, I was actually visiting this small village that I used to live in, and I'm sitting on the edge of this amazing valley, and I'm watching the sunset. And then I had this really weird thought, and I was like, wow, imagine we lived in a world that was always either day or always night, and there was always one season, and it was never too hot or never too cold, and it was almost this like static, still world where there was no change of season, there was no change of time, like there was no summer fruits or midnight swims, and it was almost like this stagnant world with no cycles. And then I like came back and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not the world that we live in. And I'm watching this beautiful sunset and the day is ending, Shabbat is ending, and, you know, a new week is coming back in. And then I thought about, you know, all the cycles that govern our lives, and the cycle of the day and the cycle of the month and the cycle of the season and the cycle of the year. And we rarely live in this world that has a circular nature of life and death. And then I was thinking about the cycle that really exists within every single one of us, the women at least that are the bleeders among us, and really a monthly cycle that occurs within a cycle of life and of death, and that really has the potential to not just affect us, but to empower us to live in a much more deeply connected and empowering connection to ourselves. But the thing is that most of us, and I can at least speak to myself, we grew up not really aware of the power and the magic that is the menstrual cycle. And the way that we kind of, I would say, most relate to it is, first of all, not really knowing when next bleed is coming. And even our immediate association when we think about the menstrual cycle, it's usually one of dread and grossness and, ugh, it's messy, it's painful, it's PMS, it's, oh my God, I'm going to binge, oh, I'm feeling guilty for binging or whatever it is. And all of these symptoms, like knowing that I'm going to get a killer headache before the menstrual cycle, are almost normalized in our society. And these are symptoms that are normalized for healthy people. And that's not even talking about all the other symptoms that occur for women that aren't so healthy, like polycystic ovary syndrome and acute PMS and other mental health and other menstrual and fertility issues. And that can also relate to mental health. But what if we could really understand that our periods are so much more than just a bleed, and not being in a place of dread and like, cool, I'm going to pop 2 Advils, but knowing that this is really a magical time and a cycle of recalibration and really the inception of a creative process, and that our periods are actually power. And when I say power, I don't mean power in the like staunch feminist protest kind of way, like let's put blood on our shirts. Like, no, it's a deep wisdom, and it's a power that is the power of being in tune with myself and being aware the entire month of what's happening to me on an emotional level, psychological level, physical level, and dare I even say on a spiritual level, because it really affects our entire system. And before we get there, I'm sure that most of you have kind of heard of the term Femtech. It's kind of a new term, it's a buzzword, some people like it, some people don't like it, but Femtech basically is female technology, and that is tech made for women. So really the kind of technology that leads a woman throughout her life cycle, from menstruation to pregnancy to menopause. And basically all this technology is external technology. You know, it's breast pump, it's electronic menstrual cups, it's all these things that kind of exist outside of the body. But the way that I've started perceiving my body, and especially my female body, is that I have an internal inner femtech. And what this means is that we have an internal technology. And just like how when you buy a new washing machine, you have a manual of how to use your washing machine, the same way we have internal technology. But most of us were never really taught how to use this technology and use it not just that, but to make us absolute superstars. And thankfully and super gratefully, over a year ago, I was lucky enough to meet my super dear friend, Jess, who is actually with us on this call and will be taking calls later. But Jess is not just my dear friend, she's an advocate, and she's a menstrual cycle awareness educator who runs her own entire online school, and she does courses, and she's a real advocate. And she really has been guiding and educating, and she embodies everything about menstrual cycle awareness. And I think that it's really special to be able to learn from someone so close to you. And one of the amazing lessons that Jess has really taught me is the lesson of the power of autonomy. And yes, it's very easy to say, oh, well, I was never taught this at school, so I'm just not going to know how to do this. But like the power of autonomy is understanding that it is our responsibility. It's not the system. It's not blaming the school or your parents. It's knowing that it is my responsibility to educate myself and to take ownership of my body and to understand how it works and how it can make you better and how you can biohack your body and how you can be amazing and productive and creative by being connected to your menstrual cycle. So first of all, I welcome you and I invite you to take a moment for yourself and to really thank yourself for bringing yourself here today and coming on live 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, most random time of the week, but really showing up for yourself, not just in a way of self-care, but knowing that as a woman, when I come closer to myself and I'm able to heal myself on all my levels, I'm also able to heal the world. So before we begin, just a few disclaimers. The first is menstrual cycle awareness is not something that you can learn overnight and understand and just kind of go and carry on. Menstrual cycle awareness is really a new way of experiencing yourself and experiencing your body, experiencing your life and your creativity. And it takes a lot of time, it takes mindfulness, and it's really a process that doesn't take a month or 6 months or a year, but really it's a process of life and it's holding a new perspective on how to see the world in a way that is psychocentral. Second thing that I wanted to say is that I'm not a medical professional and this is not medical advice. These are deep insights rooted in a lot of scientific research. But if you do have any questions at the end, we are going to be having an open panel. Jess Fleisch is going to be on that panel answering whatever questions you need, as will I be. But you can write those questions in the chat below. So let's begin. What the bleed is biohacking. So we know that biohacking is basically the practice of using food, lifestyle, exercise, different kinds of supplements to enhancing your health. But this is great for bodies in general. But the thing is that as women, we have another element that we have to take into consideration. And that element is our hormones. So this slide over here, just to give you a biology 101 class, is the hormonal level of a woman in the 28 to 30 day period of her period. At the beginning, where you see the FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone, that is kind of at the end of your menstrual cycle, where of the bleed, it's the end of the bleed, kind of the start of the menstrual cycle. And that is where all your hormones are really low. And then we can see as we're heading up to the middle of the month, close to ovulation, my hormones are rising. And then if the egg was not fertilized, my hormones kind of drop back down, decreasing all the way until they go back into my next bleed. And then my hormones go back, they drop down very, very low. And when we look at the uterine lining, we can kind of see the same thing. You can see at the beginning, it's the end of the bleed and the breakdown of the blood from the body, and then your uterine lining is growing and growing and growing, hitting its peak, not hitting its peak, but like rising around ovulation, hitting its peak just before the menstrual cycle, and then coming back down. And I think that it's very important to understand these hormonal levels in order to understand the different phases within the menstrual cycle. So normally when we think about the menstrual cycle, we think about, oh, cool, I have the bleed, and then I have the rest of the month, and yeah, my period is just my bleed. But actually what we need to understand is that the menstrual cycle is an entire process. And kind of this is a system that breaks it down into 4 different phases. But what I do want to say is that none of these phases are set in stone. Yes, they're all affected by your hormonal levels, which are backed up by your physiology, but there are crossover days and things are fluid and women are different. So nothing that I'm saying is set in stone, but this is just the system that better allows us to understand what's going on and understand our bodies. So we have 4 phases in the menstrual cycle. The first is the menstruation, the actual bleed. The second is the follicular phase, which which is kind of the phase all the way up until when you ovulate. Then you have the ovulation, and then you have the luteal phase, which is the phase leading up until the bleed again. So if we look at it in a chart, we can actually see that if this is the month, kind of we start off with the menstrual phase from day 1 to 5, 1 to 7. We then move on to the follicular phase. We then move on to the ovulation, and then the luteal phase, and then again. Now, I'm breaking it down for you because it's quite a lot of information, and I just want to give you a few bite-sized information. So we see over here that we have the 4 different phases. And one way to kind of perceive all these phases is through the analogy of the seasons. So every phase actually becomes a season. And we know that menstruation is called the inner winter. The follicular phase is the inner spring. Ovulatory then is the inner summer. And then we have the inner winter. And the reason that we give this metaphor of the seasons is in the inner winter, we kind of have the death, which is the bleed, which is the potentiality of life that did not come into being. And then when that ends, we kind of start, our hormones are rising and we're starting to build the lining and prepare for the next round of life and potentiality of life. And that is the spring. And then we reach kind of, the peak, which is the summer. And the summer is when you're fertile and juicy and just like delicious. And then if the egg is not fertilized, we kind of go into the inner autumn, the decrease of hormones, and then we're going back down into the inner winter, which is, again, the bleed. So using this metaphor, because we're so used to the cycles of the year, in Israel not so much because they are so blurred, but if any of you, have lived abroad where each season is quite distinct, we can also understand and use that to relate to our menstrual cycles and the different phases within. So let's dive into each one of the phases and how my hormones affect my mental state, my physical state, etc. So I'm going to start off with the follicular phase, it's kind of the first phase really is the menstrual phase, but I want to start off with the rise of the spring up until ovulation, and then leave kind of the menstrual cycle for the end. But the beginning of the cycle is actually the bleed, which is usually I've written here 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 7. So the follicular phase, the inner spring, is really when you're kind of this creative superstar. And it's when you have a lot of creative energy. And I wrote here when you're a true creative goddess. And really what this is about is that because your hormones are rising, your brain is really starting to get wired with amazing ideas, and there's an increase in estrogen. And this is really a time to start brainstorming, all the big dreams, all the big visions, starting to initiate projects, starting to plan for the month ahead. It's really the time of visioning and setting out kind of, what I want to achieve and that breakdown for the month that is to come, because I've just bled, I've just rested, and now I'm going into this new month. So it's really a time of high energy, not as high as as when you're ovulating, but it definitely is that increase in energy. So you'll feel like you have more strength to do. And then we move on to the ovulation phase. So this is when you're fertile. It usually lasts between days 12 and 16. And even though the ovulation period is actually only 24 hours, the ovulation period lasts actually a few days where you're fertile. And in this part of the menstrual cycle, this is the phase where your brain is really most poised to be super verbal and to just be a communicator and have a lot of collaboration skills. And this is kind of the max time of the month. So in this time, you really want to communicate and collaborate. You want to plan those podcasts, those pitches. If you have important conversations to make with your boss or whatever it is, this is kind of it's an important time just because your brain is wired in that way, and you do have that energy and you do have that zest, and maybe you want to negotiate in this time, or ask for a raise, or work with certain people that you wouldn't normally have the courage to work with, or pitch ideas that you wouldn't normally have, or even just say yes to things you normally wouldn't. So this is really an amazing time because your body it's ready to conceive. So it kind of makes you this magnet. And if I'm able to know when I'm ovulating, then I can use this to my advantage. So after we have the ovulation phase, we then go into the luteal phase. And the luteal phase is kind of the power phase of getting things done. It's when you're most task-oriented and when you feel like real pleasure at completing a project at this time, because you initiated the projects in the follicular phase, and then you kind of reached the peak in the ovulation, and now you're in the luteal phase, and you're kind of wrapping things up. You're paying attention to fine details, and you're really able to leverage this time to create like flawless, amazing work. It's time to wrap up projects, to bring things to completion, to do, maybe there's a lot of admin tasks that you need to do. This is also kind of the time to let and create space for the inner critic. And Jess talks about this a lot, this whole idea of, the whole month we have this this voice that's talking to us behind our head, like, why are you not enough this? Why are you not doing this? Whatever it is. And really the point is to tell the inner critic to just kind of shut up until you get to the luteal phase. And in the luteal phase, where you're more open and intuitive, like, you can really let her speak and bring her out in a way that is empowering and not in a way that's bringing you down during the rise. So after that, we have the menstruation, the bleed. And the bleed is really all about intuition, and it's about reflection. This is a time to switch off your engines and to rest. It's a time to course correct, to evaluate, to listen to your gut feelings. And it's also really amazing because when you bleed, there's actually a drop in your hormone levels, and then your left brain and your right brain are super connected and they're communicating together. So you really have access to a lot of analytical as well as intuitive reasoning. So it's really, a time where you're pretty sharp and amazing. And also just using this time to reflect on the month that was. How was your performance? How am I getting along with my colleagues? Am I doing what I planned? Am I working on my projects that I care about? Is my job going in the direction that I wanted to be? Am I happy? Am I successful in what I'm doing? And this is really the time of reflection. And it's interesting because I happen to observe the Shabbat, which is kind of like the rest of the week. And the way that I see it, it's like this, the Shabbat is kind of like the bleed of the week. And we know like the time for Shabbat is to pause, is to recalibrate, is to just enjoy time with myself, with my family, with friends. So mirroring the Shabbat, I feel, is the menstrual phase, which is the time of intuition, rest, and reflection. So now that we have a breakdown of the 4 phases, as I discussed, we have 4 phases. We spoke about the inner seasons, and now we had a breakdown of the 4 phases. And now I want to kind of get into the juicy stuff of why we came here, and to really learn how to understand, to biohack every single one of these phases. So the main biohacks I'm going to be talking about are nutrition, exercise, morning routines, and a few emotional biohacks. And then towards the end of the session, we're going to be talking about how all of these, and how when I learned to leverage every one of these phases and I learned how to biohack myself in all of these ways, how then I can harness and hone in many values and character traits of female leadership that is connected, that is intuitive, and that is psychocentral. So the first biohack that I wanted to discuss was nutrition. And changing what you eat every week is kind of like, okay, well, if my hormones are different every week, then so should my menu be. Because what happens is that my hormones need different foods to stimulate the the release of different hormones. So when I'm able to eat to assist my body and to help it and to nourish it, then I can have a much healthier period. And also, once I'm able to be connected to my period and bring awareness to it, it actually can also really help me with many issues like PMS, irregular periods, and different things like that. Because basically my metabolism also changes during my cycle. But I know that when I'm bleeding, my body is burning more calories. So therefore I have to know that I need to adjust my caloric intake in every single week. So unlike men who really thrive by eating more or less the same every single day, as women, we'll really look and feel our best when we organize our food to match our metabolism. And in the big picture, this will really help you in regaining energy, clearing your skin, have regular periods, minimizing PMS. And also another thing that I wanted to say is that even in weight loss, there has been research that's been done that says that women who follow a nutrition plan that is based according to their hormonal levels and their menstrual cycle actually tend to lose more weight than women who were on a normal diet. That's a whole conversation for another time, but it is amazing to know that there is such a strong correlation between our nutrition and our menstrual cycles, because we're so used to being like, yeah, let's do the keto diet, let's intermittent fast, let's just, do all these things. And it's like, well, our hormones and our cortisol have such direct correlation with our metabolism, with how our body works. So what we eat is really super important, changing that up. Question is, how do we know what to eat? That's a whole science in itself. And we will be sending you a chart with a different breakdown of which foods to eat in every week or phase. And yes, so biohack number 2 is switching up your workout and the intensity of the workout. So we know that our hormones really have a main effect on our energy levels, and therefore we need to match our exercise to our cycles. So what does that kind of look like? That if we look, let's say, at the time of the bleed, when our bodies are much weaker, it wouldn't really make sense to do a HIIT workout every single day, because basically what studies have actually shown that when you do a HIIT, for example, when you shouldn't be doing a HIIT workout, and for those who don't know what a HIIT workout is, it's a high intensity interval training. It's quite an intense training that is done in a shorter period of time, and it's more intense, and therefore it's more effective. And basically what happens is that if a woman, and this has been shown in studies, but that your body will turn on your fat storage and muscle wasting. And even though we hear that HIIT is the ultimate way to biohack your body and to lose weight, like that's true, but it's mostly true for men, because the studies have shown that women, especially in their reproductive years, due to their metabolism, temperature, and cortisol that changes throughout the cycle, it's really highly recommended that we change our workout. So what that would kind of look like is that in the beginning, in the spring and in the summer, workouts that are more intense, that are HIIT, cardio, weightlifting, whatever it is. And then as I am going back down and my hormones are decreasing, I actually want to be involved in less intense exercise. That's like Pilates or yoga or walking, etc. The third biohack is getting your morning routine working for you. We know the success story of the 5 a.m. club. Get up in the morning, do an intense workout, meditate, journal, have your 6 egg whites in the morning, and doing that every single day. Now, yeah, you want to increase your chances of success, and that's not a bad plan, but that doesn't factor the female experience of reality. And the reality is that women are different every single day. Why? Because if we look at the male hormone system vis-a-vis the female hormone system, we can see that men are kind of like the sun and women are like the moon. What does that mean? Is that males have a circadian internal hormonal rhythm, which is a 24-hour rhythm, vis-a-vis women who also have a circadian, but they also have an infradian. So that means that they have the 24 hours, but they also have the 28-day cycle. And what that means is that if you're trying to wake up in the morning and do your power ritual every single day, like, yeah, that might be totally good for men because they're full of testosterone and cortisol in the morning, but then in the afternoon they start coming down. So that means that for them, it is really empowering and good to be doing all their physical, sexual, social, productive activities early on in the morning and then kind of getting weaker by the afternoon. But for women, we do wake up differently. And we live in this business culture that is so oriented to optimize male performance because we live in a 9-to-5 world. But from a biological point of view, we can see that our work culture is not organized to support really the female biology. And we're always trying to squeeze ourselves into this structure. But if we realize that as women, we are different every single day, and that maybe one day my morning routine will be to meditate, and one day I want to do a HIIT workout, and one day I want to run, one day I want to journal, one day I want to do yoga, and like not feeling that there is a way of doing it every single day, and even more so, trying to stick to this really staunch, heavy morning routine or whatever. And then when I'm not able to do it, not because I don't have enough willpower, not because I'm not committed enough, but just because today my testosterone dropped because I'm just after I ovulated and yeah, I don't really have that much power, which allows me to understand where my body is at and give myself so much more self-care and empathy. And I feel that without the scientifically correct and like gender distinct information about our biological rhythms, women assume that they just need to squeeze themselves into the same routine. And that is what will set them up for success. But we can see that it actually doesn't. So understanding our bodies also reflects itself on the sexual plane. And we know that our sexual desire, just like everything else, is different across the month. And therefore you would need different stimulation to achieve orgasm at different times. So knowing what you need and being able to communicate that with your partner or just with yourself, and without this, basically you might not be satisfied and then you think something's wrong with you, but actually nothing's wrong with you. You're just at a particular time in the month and you're trying to use a carrot to ignite an engine, but like actually you need a key. So understanding my body also allows me to come closer to myself and to my partner. So the fifth and kind of last biohack, which is also, I believe, an emotional hack, is resting and being kind for yourself. Basically, our cortisol levels are really high in one point of the infradian cycle, and therefore the just do it or push yourself mentality, as I mentioned before, will actually just increase your cortisol levels, and that will give you more stress, more anxiety, and more inflammation in your body. And what that does is that it actually disrupts your hormones and it makes you feel more anxious and reduces your ability to be creative and to be productive. So we have to understand that our bodies, our minds, and our emotional states are so interrelated, and they're part of this chain and this circle of our existence. So when I talk about cycle central, I really use it as a verb because for me, the idea of a circle represents recalibration. It represents a rebirth, a restart. And what this means is that living cycle central is not about living a system. It's about living a lifestyle. It's an awareness. Living in a circular way is really a way of being and a way of thinking that is creative and that is integrative. And when I'm able to connect between all the parts of me, physically, socially, spiritually, creatively, intellectually, I'm able to create harmony between all these sides and just be more focused and just more amazing. And the interesting thing is that even on a corporate level, this is a stat I just pulled up, of 84% of corporates and US employers actually plan to increase investment in women's well-being over the next 3 years. And what this actually means is that employers are recognizing the need to support women in feeling good with themselves and having wellness and having that common understanding. And when they do this, this actually benefits the company in general and the workplace. And therefore, it is actually monetarily advantageous for them to help women be better women. So when we learn how to kind of biohack this entire system on a creative level, on a productivity level, on a nutrition level, on a workout level, on a mental level, on an intellectual level, when we're able to put all of these pieces of the puzzle together, we land up with what I feel is a completely new outlook on ourselves and on life. And this is what I like calling leading from within. And leading from within is basically learning how to understand our bodies, make that bring out certain values and characteristics within us, and really helping and really using that to help, like I said, crack your career. So the first value I wanted to speak about was empathy. One of the things that menstrual cycle awareness really does is that it teaches us inner empathy. What does that mean? That when I know where I am in my cycle and I'm not harsh on myself and I didn't wake up at 5 a.m. and I couldn't, do the HIIT workout at 6 o'clock in the morning, when I'm able to understand myself and not be harsh on myself, I'm able to gain more empathy for myself. And once I'm able to gain more empathy within, I'm then able to gain more empathy without. And I think that part of a person who has empathy and is an empathetic leader has this high emotional intelligence because they're cultivated from within. And if we actually look, and this is super interesting, but the World Economic Forum, they always put out all these reports, and basically this is their 2020 skill set. They call it the skills outlook for 2022. And one of the skills, and you can see down at the bottom of number 8, is really all about 7 and 8, I would say, is all about emotional intelligence, leadership, and social influence. And what's amazing is a lot of these values that I'm going to be teaching you about women's and female leadership are all really interconnected to all these future skills of the World Economic Forum. So sorry about that. So we spoke about inner empathy and becoming an empathetic leader, learning to lead myself in an empathetic way, and then being able to lead others. The second thing is abundance. So menstrual cycle awareness really teaches me when to go hard and when to stop. And we're so used to living in this reality of a zero-sum game. And basically a zero-sum game means that in order for me to succeed, you have to lose. And what this means is that I'm always feeling like I have to do and go, because if I slow down for just one moment, you're gonna overtake me. And the thing is that when we learn how to stop, we learn to surrender, we realize that I'm meant to be where I'm meant to be, and I will get there because what I came here to do is what only I can do. And therefore there is no competition between you, and all we can do is empower each other. And I think that these periods of rest, for example, before or during your period, and the mindfulness that brings allows you to hone into your unique gifts. And surrendering into that place really teaches you the muscle of trust and not being intimidated by other people. Because when I'm able to see the magic within myself, I'm really able to see the magic within the other. And I think that a lot of the time, both in the professional setting and a social setting, we feel intimidated, and there's a lot of bitchiness and kind of cattiness, between women. And I think that the more we can learn to, I'm going to sit here, the more we can learn to see the magic within us, the more we can really learn to see the magic between the others. So the third thing I wanted to speak about is courage. And this is definitely something that Jess also really helped me understand, that through menstrual cycle awareness, really, I know when I have the courage to say yes, and I know when I want to be saying No. So using this structure to give me more of an understanding of when I'm ripe to hop onto new opportunities and when not, allows me to know that, okay, well, just before my bleed, I'm not going to feel like saying yes to this big project or this big presentation and not feeling hard on myself at that time. The next thing I wanted to talk about was sustainability. And basically, a very big part of menstrual cycle awareness is the focus on the pause and the focus on the recalibration. And basically what this does is that it really prevents burnout, because I know that there's a time for me to be active and there's a time for me to receive. And knowing that I have the time to rest gives me the space for creative downloads, and it gives me the space to kind of calm down and, recalibrate. So what this also does, I believe, is really give me time to focus on self-worth and validation. Because when I learn that even when I'm resting, I'm good enough, and I know that I don't need to constantly be creating and constantly be producing, and that even in that space, I am worthy and I am brilliant, and I don't have to constantly be doing, really helps me in my self-confidence and self-empathy. The last point that I wanted to speak about was the creative process. So we know that the entire menstrual cycle is a creative process in itself. It is the ultimate creative process, the potentiality to really bring life into this world. And what this really looks like is, the beginning, going up into the ovulation, that maximized time to create life and to bring something into the world. And while this is happening within us, while there's so much creative potential within us, this is also such a magical time to hold. Even if I'm not trying to get pregnant and I'm not trying to bring new life into this world, I want to bring a different life into this world. I want to bring a life of my intellect, of my creativity, of my wisdom, of my projects, and using the process of this recalibration and this rebirth within me every single month, honing in onto those creative energies in order to bring myself in a higher way every single month. And it's almost like, if the projection of your life is kind of like a straight line and you're constantly static, we know that what would be more advantageous is really having, something, a graph that would kind of look like a dip and a rise, and a dip and a rise. And basically what happens is that every dip allows for a higher rise. So then at the end, I've actually reached an exponential level vis-a-vis if I was just going on a straight line and just always trying to kind of go. So those were and are my 5 points of really leading from within. And I'll say them again because I think that they are so important. And the first is empathy. The second is abundance. And also one point that I wanted to add about abundance is that having this mindset allows the space for partnership, because I know that when I'm working with someone else, there is an exponential network, more creativity, and just working with someone else just can bring so much more abundance into the world. And the third is courage, knowing when to say yes and knowing that I can trust the structure of when to say yes and when to say no. The fourth, sustainability, knowing when to stop and knowing when to start, and creating a sustainable way to live that is life based on recalibration and rebirth in every single month. And the last is really honing our menstrual cycles for the creative process. So let's go over a recap of everything that we learned in this jam-packed session. So at first we spoke about the 4 phases. We spoke about which are, and I'm interested if any of you already remember them off by heart, but the 4 phases, the first, follicular phase, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual. We then compared those to the 4 seasons, the inner spring, in a summer, in a winter, and in a fall. We then spoke about the different biohacks: food, exercise, morning routines, sex drive, and the emotional biohacks. We also spoke about our different female leadership values of empathy, abundance, courage, sustainability, and honing in on the creative process. So that is a breakdown of Cycle Central, both on the biological level, on the scientific level, on the biohacking level, and on the internal female leadership career level. I would love to answer more questions that are coming up right now, and I'm going to also open up the floor to Jess, and of course, thank Women in Tech, thank Jennifer, thank Avital so much for this amazing opportunity. I invite you, if you want to learn more, first of all, we will obviously send a follow-up email with all of the insights and resources and the ability to allow you to start tracking. And actually what I did want to say, and I like to say, is really the question of what now? And some of the tips of if this did, I'm just going to move back to where I was sitting. But if this did speak to you and you want to know, okay, how can I integrate this more into my life right now? So I would say firstly by starting to track your cycle, either in your journal or in an app, and really every single day writing down how you're feeling and how you feel like that is affecting you. And also understanding where you are so you'll know what to do, what to eat, and when. There's some apps that can help you to do this, which is Clue and MyFlow. Also, I'll send you those links in an email. For the best resources and the best content, I would definitely suggest following Jess on Valley of Moons. She's available on Instagram, and she has an amazing online course with so many insights. I took it with my mom and my sister and my best friends, and we just really, really loved it. And her and I are also working on an extended online virtual course that will involve all of this biohacking as well as other female leadership coming up in the next month. So we'll give you more details about that soon. And yes, thank you so much. And just opening up the stage, I can see we have a lot of questions.
So Yarin, I will take it and I will help you and assist you with the questions that have come in. So the first question is from Orit, who is asking about paid menstruation leave within companies. This is something that Zomato, an Indian company, has recently implemented, and it received a lot of mixed feedback. So she wanted to know what's your view on menstrual leave within companies. You can both actually probably, have
I'm happy to open this question to Jess.
Jess, take it away.
Okay, so I think that
Hold on, Jess, do you want to just introduce yourself? I'm sorry.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Jess Fleisch. I know Yarin, we live in Jerusalem together. I am just obsessed with the menstrual cycle as being a real structure for success. And I don't just mean professionally, although that too, but also personally. And I'm just always just learning more about this, obviously through life, but also through books and courses and whatnot, because I find this to be a real tool for mental health, physical health, all of that. So check me out on Valley of Moons if you're interested. That's on Instagram and a website as well. So that's me, but about destigmatizing menstruation in the workplace, first off, I think that the idea of paid menstrual leave is actually really a great idea. I think that it would be best utilized if people who bleed, and we could address that question after as well, but if people who bled understood their cycles a lot more and understood that the bleed time is a real time for rest, I think that then it would actually maximize production in a company to give these cyclical bleeders time to recalibrate and really utilize the menstrual phase, as Yarin was saying. I think that giving them it now before maybe this is widespread knowledge, I think is still a good idea. And I think that anything that gets us talking about the menstrual cycle is always a good idea. I think we have years' work to still to destigmatize that. So yeah, I think that it is definitely the beginning of something big.
I think the next point is quite interesting. It says that ultimately, this is from Sterni, and this is saying that to create two categories reduces our ability to discuss important topics in a more inclusive way. There's more to the biological and hormonal level. What's your take on that?
So I could start if you have something else to say too. I think that we as cyclical bleeders are not the same as non-cyclical bleeders, and that also includes postmenopausal women as well. They are not bleeders, and they have a hormonal cycle similar to men. They're back to the circadian rhythm. Obviously, they're not producing, I don't mean that they're producing the same hormones as men, but I mean they're no longer in the 4 phases. They no longer ovulate, they're no longer menstruating, and this is these differences are significant. Whether, like, if you're not bleeding, this is not how you biohack your life. You have other ways to biohack your life, and many people know those ways already. Like the 9 to 5 work schedule is a way to biohack your circadian rhythm, as well as a lot of, some of the exercises Yarin was saying, like a HIIT workout, or waking up early every single day, and like getting everything done before 9 a.m. Like that's like your workout and your food and whatever. But cyclical bodies work a little differently. And I think, yeah, we can change the narrative and not say the word woman when we're talking about cyclical bodies. I personally like to say women and cyclical bleeders, because I identify as a woman, and I think a lot of women, most cyclical bleeders do identify as women. So I like the term woman. So personally, I use it, but I also use the word cyclical bleeders as well, because I do want to be inclusive to those who have, who menstruate, who identify as men. But people who menstruate are very different than people who do not menstruate. And that's the whole point, to like biohack your life, understanding those differences.
I think a lot of it also kind of goes back to the idea of like whether the period is something that you embrace and you kind of want to be a part of your life, or if you are transitioning and it's not something that you actually want to have involvement with, then you're not going to be looking to optimize your, you know what I mean? Like it's an interesting point, but it's also saying that this is for people that want to actually have their periods. I mean, not any woman, thinks this is the best thing ever, but wants to make sure this is something that she can get the most of because it's something that she's having and wants to have every month. So
Definitely.
I think it's, basic.
Yeah, I think that's also really interesting, because I think I'm curious about people who are transitioning or who do identify as men. I have not come across them as in my menstrual cycle awareness world, and I would love to chat with them. Like that's a really fascinating intersection.
Yeah. Yarin, anything you want to add into the conversation on that point?
I do. I think that it is not complex, but it's just like menstrual cycle awareness. I feel like it's so kind of is a new kind of conversation, and I think that definitely including people who do identify themselves as male but or female, whatever, and have different like by XY chromosomes, like exactly what Sterni was talking about. I'll read to you what she was saying. Is basically that creating two categories reduces our ability to discuss important topics that are more inclusive. And I definitely think that there is value to that. I feel like I'm still new on this journey, and that there's so much more work to do in understanding the other and including everyone into the conversation, and definitely something to work on and open up moving forward.
Jess, is there anything that you kind of, if you were in the audience right now, that you wish you'd be asking you, or that you would want to answer and hope that they had brought up?
There was one thing, just when Yarin said how you can start, I'd just like love anyone to be able to start. So I'd love to add to how you can start. And just Yarin was saying how charting is a really good way. And I always say that too, but like I want to just reiterate that point. Like if you just write down a couple of words about how you're feeling at the end of a day, and then after 3 cycles, if you could just do it for 3 cycles, you'll start to notice patterns. And that's what's so exciting. Like, it's just, you'll realize like, oh, maybe I should never have date night on day 27 because sometimes that could be great because life, happens. You're not just your hormones. But if you notice that every single cycle on day 27, you're kind of a bitch, it's a good idea to maybe not socialize with the people that bring up the most for you, like those kinds of things. And so that's how it can be really helpful. So I really recommend, even if it's just a couple words, and also if you have a journaling practice, to always write your cycle day next to the date, because then that's a really easy way to look back. Like I'll just write the date and then write cycle day 20 or cycle day 10, whatever it is. And when you're on your period, it could be fun to write in red because a lot comes up on your period. I've actually noticed a lot of cyclical leaders say that before they knew about menstrual cycle awareness, when they were reading old journals, they're always bleeding. Like two of my students have mentioned that. Like they're like, oh, like every time I journal, I'm on my period, and that's because you tend to have a tendency to write and just release what you're feeling at that time. So it could be really helpful to write in red as well, because you could look back and be like, oh, interesting, because the important stuff comes up then. So those are just a couple suggestions on how to start.
I think that's definitely like a very good way for people to kind of get cracking on it. I think the last point, which is just something that we're going to close on, is there something that we should be telling our boss? Do you think it's something that we have the ability to turn around and say, listen, I'm not going to be as productive this week? Or do you think we're doing us a disservice? I think that's like a good question. Like, should it be something that we openly tell our bosses?
Yarin,
So it's funny because I feel like I've never really had this issue. And what I do know is that it is very difficult, especially in companies where, the management is a lot more straightforward and isn't so open-minded and doesn't really understand these nuances. But I think one of the most important things in terms of management is that your boss needs to understand that if you're coming to him or her and saying, listen, I'm not going to be as productive this week, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not going to prove to him and show to him that okay, I'm going to be less productive this week, but next week I'm going to be so much more productive. And the whole point is that if you are more in tune with your cycle, and I feel like only if you're able to hone in this lifestyle and this outlook, then you have the right and legitimacy to go to your boss and say, listen, I'm unproductive this week. Why? Because you know how to use it to make yourself productive next week, and not just make them feel like your period is a burden, but rather show them how your period is empowering you and increasing the bottom line of the company.
Yeah, that's definitely good insight. Jess, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I have one more thing to add. I think that also if you have to be productive, then let's say you have to give a presentation or you have to stay up really late, whatever, it's important to know yourself that you are in this time and to give yourself some added time for rest. And if that's 10 minutes of a 10-minute nap in the day, maybe 20 if you could pull it, or you take a bath, or just trying to take time for real self-care when you're in this period of self-care, and it's the more introversion or self-love, self-attention. So then you can still give output and it will be less draining to be productive if you can give yourself that during this time.
Okay, well, ladies, I think that's an amazing way to finish off. We are going back to end with Jennifer, so please handing it over to you. Jennifer, you're muted.
Hi again. Thank you, Avital. Ladies, this was awesome. Thank you, Yarin, Jess, Avital. Maybe I have one comment that I've heard in a very high-level career-oriented woman, let's say that have executive position, they tend in their time of period of their cycle to not take a high or important decision, and they tend to surround themselves in the workplace with, let's say, their right and left hand, so they can take decision as a group, knowing that at this moment they might be a bit lower or more emotional or having a bit less of a objective point of view on facts because of what the body emerged and this time. So I found this also very interesting of the act that some women are doing. Again, thank you so much. If you want to email Yarin, you have her email at the bottom of this live. I believe we're going to send you an email, and Yarin can share also your information.
We'll put that in a follow-up email for everyone.
Perfect. And just to finish, to tell you that at Women in Tech Israel, we're still looking for volunteer and to have the 2 board members on our team. So if you're interested to take part of the journey, the adventure with us at Women in Tech Israel, and be part of a bigger organization of this Women in Tech with all the other chapters, you can actually send me an email at jennifer@womenintech.org, and it will be my pleasure. Ladies, once again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and continue to biohack your life.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.